Hello and welcome to episode 23 of That 60s Recording Podcast, the podcast that has conversations inspired by the golden era of recording. Okay, before we begin today, I've got some exciting news, something cool that has happened. So I'm recording this on Monday, the 1st of March at 7:45 in the evening after I've put my two little girls to bed. So we are that up to date. You'll notice also that the sound is probably slightly different because I'm in the kitchen, and you'll be able to hear my dishwasher going as well. Me and my wife are fighting for house space this evening. She's got to record some teaching videos. She's a primary school teacher for school. So I volunteered to go into the kitchen, seeing as my setup is quite portable. Anyway, so the cool news that's happened is on Thursday, I had an email from the enterprise editor of the Times newspaper. I know that the majority of my listeners are over in the United States, and not sure how much you get to see of UK stuff. I know that I hear The Guardian mentioned in a lot of the American podcasts I listen to, but the Times is what we call a broadsheet newspaper, which is a little bit more detailed than the crappy newspapers. So anyway, I pretty much almost deleted it because I thought it was I just didn't think it was real. I thought it was a phishing thing. So anyway, I read the email, and turns out that he listens to this podcast and is on my Isolated Drums mailing list and wanted to interview me as a contributor to a piece he was writing about podcasts as a sort of business tool. And I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely flattered to have been asked to be, even just to have my opinion considered. I was flattered. And it just made me... Anyway, it was in today's paper, so Monday the 1st of March, in the business section. I'm in a subsection, and they mention this podcast and the way that it helps me operate my sort of business model, if you like. And yeah, that's that. It's just very cool to have this business, which is kind of only just a year old, really, mentioned in national newspapers, and it kind of, if I may say so, made me feel quite proud of what this has all achieved. And with that in mind, I want to express all of my thanks to you guys for listening, because when I started this out, I was completely happy with sort of 20-30 listeners and did not expect for 1 second that I would be getting I get sort of upwards of 1,200 listens a month, and I'm absolutely flabbergasted. So thank you to every single one of you who takes the time to listen to this and emails me with feedback, telling me that you enjoy it, with guest suggestions. Everybody, anyone who's ever said anything nice on Instagram about this or anything on Facebook or whatever, just thank you all, and really wouldn't have... we really wouldn't be in a position to have this podcast mentioned in a national newspaper if it wasn't for you guys. So I really appreciate it. Righto. So today I'm continuing my conversation with Simon Trought of Soup Studios. Lots of people have got in touch, lots of the artists that I work with, to say that they've recorded with Simon. So it turns out he's done quite a lot of stuff. And in fact, one of the stories, I can't remember if it's in the last episode or this episode, that we talk about with the ukulele shop, is about one of the artists that I'm working with right now. So anyway, I thought that was really funny that I didn't quite realise how... I don't quite know what the word I'm looking for is. How prolific, that's it, Simon is. And he clearly is extremely prolific in sort of the London music scene. Anyway, I'll let you go straight on now, and I'll quit my waffling. So here it is, part 2 of Simon Trought Soup Studios. I'm curious to know, so if we think of a band... perhaps a band along the same lines that we've been talking about, and they come to the studio and and decide that they want to do something along the lines of what we've just been discussing. Do you have a routine approach to producing and working with a band like that, or does it vary per? I'm thinking in terms of like the way that you set kit mics up, or the way that you ask them to record. Do do you have a routine, or does it just vary per session?
No, I've not really. I don't really have a routine. I guess every session's so different, and the players are all different. It seems weird to have a routine. Sometimes I don't know what the drums, even with the same mic setup, that say if you'd left one up from the day before or something to save a bit of time or something, and you're like, oh well, it's a similar setup, I'll kind of leave it up. The drummer just would play differently. When a drummer's setting up, I'm getting him to play, and I'm bobbing around with my ear, close in around it, and it's just like I'm gonna mic the drums or the guitar up to how they're playing. So it can be quite different. Also, I mean that was a kind of one-off. We all wanted to do that little soul project and do that full live recording around the singer, but that's few and far between.
Yeah.
It's quite niche, and that's not what our studio's full of. It'd be great if it was sometimes, but it's no one has that kind of money to do decadent stuff like that. Unless that's your thing and you're a touring band and you do that really well. Like a bluegrass thing around one mic, that kind of thing or something. But so sometimes you want to take elements of that, of the exciting process of doing that, but you'll split it down. You just try and get the singer, instead of him in the booth or her, get them in the room, in the action and doing that live vocal for real, even though it is a scratch vocal, but just get them baffled off enough so that it's not going to, so you can go over it, and maybe, they've all rehearsed, say if you've got a few guitars and bass and whatnot in the room, but they want to record, in a kind of 60s way and have all that ethic and energy. But at the end of the day, which is the plan, pre-planned, they still want to track into it and record over it. So you'd kind of set it up as a rehearsal. What you ideally want is the band to be in a comfortable rehearsal room all day. Sometimes they even set a PA up in the room so that the singer's there singing through no headphones. Everyone's just like they're rehearsing or a little gig or something. And then you just turn the amps off, and so you're just taking the DIs, put headphones on, everyone's got a nice mix. But the vibe's still there and the singer's still singing, but you try and capture that energy while it's there of them being natural and having fun. Quickly, like I say, turn the amps off so you just actually capturing the drums in the room. Maybe you'll get a little bit of bleed of a guitar that is going to be there in some form, not radically different. So it doesn't matter if you hear on the finished result a bit of a sketchy, little flam from a guitar. That's the kind of shit I like hearing on records anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Where they've been worked into and how it's been brought to to where it is. So there's ways of kind of breaking that ethic down and using it all, but not fully committing to like, every note we're playing is that's it. It's going to be on the radio next week.
I think
sometimes it's just too high pressure, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting. You're sort of getting best of both worlds. We have access to amazing technology, so we ought to. Not ought to, but it would be foolish to not use it. But it's so much of what I enjoy about it all is it's the sort of mentality towards the process. So it's getting that vibe, and setting the situation up so that you've got the option to mix it in a modern environment, if you like. Using all the mod cons, but. It's the important part of it is getting it right on the way in, with the mentality that sort of having the analog gear forces you to have. But and the way you've just described setting it up like that, I think is really cool and is really important. I think that's a really great way of doing it.
Yeah. Like sometimes a lot of the time it's really successful, and me and the band are really happy, and just the way the whole thing just really worked. The other half of the time it can really fall flat on its face. You've just made a load of spilled problems for yourself, and they'll come back in a month later. I've changed that bit. Can we move that section there? It's just like, oh god, that's kind of, now you're battling against the bits of spill and the weirdness of doing a kind of semi-live recording, so it can backfire sometimes, but not the end of the world, is it?
No, you take your chances, don't you?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of particular references on the website that you've put up there, and I think what you wrote, it's quite nice actually. You've put some of the, I'm assuming it's the records that you're quite proud of working on, and you put a little description underneath of the way that you've worked on it, and I think there's a couple there that sort of really, I don't know, I enjoyed reading about, and one of them is how do you pronounce it? The Cinelli brothers.
Cinelli brothers, yeah.
And you talked about the way you set up the room mics, that you were able to start off with the room mics as your starting point, and then bringing close mics up in the mix to help get the definition, I'm assuming. And I love that ethos. I just wondered if you could talk about the way that I'm going to put links to these in the notes of the show, so people can hopefully go and listen once you've talked about it. I'd love to hear you discussing the way you approach that particular record.
Yeah. I mean, I can't take full credit for that, because, even though it's, that's stuff that I've kind of done in the past, for that session, I was really into the band, and I was a bit nervous about recording them. And, like it's a bit of a flurry to get it all set up and everything. But we set up a pair of coals up in the middle of the room on this kind of bar that puts them in a really good kind of phase coherent kind of thing. And it was their suggestion really. It's like, we're not going to record a note until, for real, until the whole band sounds balanced in this pair of coals. And I was just like, oh yeah, I'm on this shit. Great, this is brilliant. This is brilliant all over this. So, and it was just a real eye opener, because they were quite recording nerds themselves, So they came in to do this kind of big blues record, which was super cool. So they needed to come in and record it better than what they could, obviously, in their little project spaces and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And it was just fascinating to have a stereo picture that totally lines up with where they all were in the room for a start, and then tweaking the amp, they say the guitar amp or the bass amp, just by tiny bits that actually made a massive difference to that balanced sound in those room mics. And then like I said, everything else was just mic'd up, nicely as well, but not overly mic'd. Maybe 4 mics on the drums, and one on the guitar cab, not like crazy multi mics or anything like that. Just because it hardly needed any bolstering. If you can get that bit right, it only needed little bits of the close mics to, it sounded too weird if you had them too high.
Yeah.
It didn't sound right. Because it's a proper like kind of BB King live kind of vibe, that record, I suppose. Like the amazing thing about that band, the singer was also playing the lead guitar licks and everything, which I found totally mind-blowing. I couldn't figure out. It's like the man with two brains, how he was making this sweet sound come out of the guitar amp, and at the same time singing just completely, on point, and soulful and everything. It's really one thing about that session. I remember it was a few weeks before they came in. I was nerding out with a friend about like 60s vocal sounds and stuff, and my friend was like, oh, I love that sound where it sounds like the vocal doesn't fit in the mic, like it's all like spilling out around the edges because it doesn't fit in. Do you know what I mean? and it really got me going. It's like, oh, I'm going to try something like this with this blues band. So I actually, for his main vocal, I used a D19 C,
interesting.
the Beatles Beatles mic, through that Drama valve pre, and it totally had that effect. He was kind of blowing it out. He was blowing so much into that mic that it gave it that. I don't know. Like, it's like everyone talks about it now. That kind of perceived loudness, don't they? It sounds more powerful and big when it doesn't. When you're not capturing it all, and it's like something's a bit strained somewhere. You know, if you imagine if he was singing in a clean room or a vocal booth through a big condenser mic and it was picking up everything that he was singing, and then you kind of have to squash that down in a kind of, you know, compress it down so that it fits within the music, then he's going to sound like he's smaller. But if you know what I mean? But if you, I don't know, maybe part of his voice, you know, was coming out on some room mics as well. I can't remember, but the vocal sound I was really, really chuffed with on that record. Like it sounded, you know, like ripping. Like it, you know, it just, yeah.
I love the idea
that really worked. Yeah,
the vocals spilling out of the mic. That's
like it doesn't fit in. Like all that big voice just doesn't go down that little tube. So a bit goes in, and the rest all gets kind of squashed out around the edges, like an ice cream melting or something. It's got, do you know what I mean?
What a cool way of thinking about it. That's incredible. I love it. And that is the sound of those D19s, isn't it? I can picture exactly what you're talking about just from the way you're describing it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And they've got a really fast attack on them, you know, like a lot of it was that spitty kind of vocal, and it's like it softened it, but it kept the attack, you know, it kept the attack and then rounded off the rest of it. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. And I guess the having the Coles doing the sort of the heavy work with everybody else is a good choice. I mean, I have a mono Coles that I use on the kit, and I know that it's got such a nice low end to it, and it's such a rich sounding mic. I can imagine it's perfect for sort of getting that nice balance. They feel like the perfect pair of mics to use for that, and I can imagine exactly how they'd have sounded. Yeah.
Yeah, it really worked because they were right. We had in that studio really high ceilings, so we had them quite high up. And obviously they're so bassy, those mics, aren't they? But when they're not being used like close up on a guitar amp or something, you know, that really low bass, it's not super pronounced like proximity wise, like when you're using them close up. But it's all there, isn't it? All that depth is just being captured kind of secretly down at the bottom, isn't it? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, good choice for that. Yeah.
So then the second one that sort of stood out was actually the first. I'm calling them reference tracks, but they're just tracks that you've got up as an examples of what you do. But there's a chap called Johnny Flynn. You're talking about the wax cylinder recording that he brought in. And you sort of dovetail it in with him singing. Playing now, and the way that record sounds is so cool. It sounds like an old, you know, turn of the century sort of wax cylinder recording, and then suddenly morphs. If you skip it from the beginning to the end, it's morphed into current sound, but you're not quite sure when that happened.
Yeah. I think maybe it flows between that wax cylinder recording and a nicely recorded modern recording, maybe 2 or 3 times within the song. Mm-hmm. And it ends as it started with the really scratchy, loads of wow and flutter, blah, 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 you know, and then whoosh, the record, the needle, falling off or something. But that was really fun. It was. Johnny. He's a lovely guy to work with, Johnny Flynn, very generous as well, but. Like I think he's a real recording nerd as well. He got the opportunity to go and record it. Someone set this. It was like a kind of corporate. Someone was selling some bourbon, like a corporate gig, and they'd invited people to come to this really busy club, and it was kind of set up in some booth where, you know, people would just go in and record and sing something, you know, so the audience were hearing it as well, but it was being recorded, and it was some old fangled, you know, mad inventor wax cylinder type of thing, and at the same time it was being pressed onto a flexi disc, like instantly as well. So that's what he brought in from the night before doing this weird gig, because he wanted to go and do this weird recording. You know, we'd just put it on the turntable to record it into the interface, just so he had it for reference. You know, I don't think he was really going to use it, or maybe it was just a fun thing to do. Yeah. And I was just like blown away with how that sounded. Oh God, yeah. It's that kind of stuff that you try and recreate with all sorts of like clever technology, but it never really sounds right. You know, and it was just a really nice process to get the band to just put their parts go over it like that was a guide track, like you're working into it, and then for the final mix, moving the listener between the two scenarios. Really,
was it a
nice
challenge to match? Obviously, you're not matching them perfectly, but sort of
no.
complement each other. Was it a challenge to get the balance?
They're all good musicians who work with Johnny, so it wasn't too bad. And maybe what even decided where we faded the old and the new in was the bits that there was kind of a bit more nailed rather than too sloppy and messy. You know, so just like the whole take wasn't amazing, but the bits where the new recording comes up, they were tight and not super tight, because then I like the jar of it being slightly off as well when it crosses over. Yeah.
Oh, it's just really cool. I mean, wax cylinders is not something you that come up in conversation very often.
No, and I wish I'd been there that night to see it and just have a little nerd out on what the gear. I can't even remember the details. It was, I was just blown away when I heard it, and
really cool.
Yeah.
Have you got any? Like I say, I'm going to link to some projects, and everything that we've talked about, I'll put links to. And have you got any other artists that you've worked with that you're particularly fond of? The sounds that you've got.
I mean, the main ones, not so recent, but over the years of working with the Wave Pictures, that's always been a highlight. Allo Darling, Let's Wrestle, those kind of bands. Did a lot of that kind of like, quite immediate, new kind of young music, in the couple of studios ago. We were underneath a ukulele shop in just off Brick Lane. And it was just a real buzzing hive. Bands would just walk in because they'd want to buy a harmonica or a ukulele or something, and they'd hear someone playing drums downstairs, and next minute they're booked in to record down in this weird little space under the ukulele shop. So that's where I met all those really exciting kind of bands from around that time. About 10 years ago or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Wave Pictures, I'm good friends with them now. We're snooker buddies as well as recording buddies. But
oh, nice.
yeah. I mean, they're just one of those bands that you could just stick a tin can and a piece of string in front of them and they sound good. Do you know what I mean? They're insanely talented, those guys.
Funnily enough, while I was cooking, my family, I called them the girls because there's two little girls and my wife. While I was cooking the girls' dinner, that's who I had on the Spotify. And I loved it too. I think it's absolutely brilliant. They do sound absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, and I was still. This is before I'd really got to grips with, professional type of recording, commercial recording, which we do a bit more of these days just because of the nature of where we are. But back then I was still back in the, that was on the old MS Tascam MS tape machine, and just the room was so tiny that we couldn't even record like double basses down there because the ceiling was so low.
Oh wow!
And it was just so loud. That was again the early stuff. Dave singing through an old Vox PA in the room, and the vocal sound was pretty much, a mic on the cab of the Vox PA, and it kind of sounds like that. It's really rough and sketchy sounding, and everything's, really loud in this tiny room, and everything's just getting clustered up together. But it just sounds super cool. All that stuff did. The Let's Wrestle, when they recorded down there, they nearly blew the roof off how loud they were, and it's, there's no, subtleties with ambient miking in a situation like that. You just got to get some mics in front of these amps that are going to cope with the volume and then sort it out afterwards. Exciting times those days.
Yeah, it's cool. I like how just trying to think of the best way to put it into words. I really enjoy how the way that you work has evolved to the point where you've now got it sounds like you do some fairly eclectic recordings from right from the sort of really interesting stuff that we've been talking about through to sort of modern stuff. But the way that your journey's led up to it has been it's almost that it's like paying your dues almost. Like the way you're describing recording in that room has meant that when you came to doing something like the Cinelli brothers that we've discussed, it's almost the same thing but with a bit more finesse now that
totally
I think it's really interesting hearing about it. I every new thing every new story is like, okay, I can see why you've done some of the things that you've done on the things I've heard because of what you've just said.
Yeah, it would be totally overwhelming. Like even say if you'd gone to college and learnt music production or engineering for a few years, and then been thrown into the world of recording as how it is now in a commercial studio, it would be so daunting. So I do feel lucky that I had a really slow progression, and mainly working, learning on the job. Really, I didn't have any formal training as a sound engineer, and probably to my detriment along the way. A lot of the times I just wish, oh God, I wish I knew how this shit worked rather than just like busking it all the time. Maybe some of the bands, might have helped them a little further down the road if I'd have known what I was doing a bit more rather than just having a party with them. You know what I mean? So.
Oh well, life's there for living, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I wonder if let's do this one first. So of all the gear in the studio, you've got quite a lot of. We've talked about studio gear. There's a load of you've got some really lovely instruments there too. But do you have a piece of gear that you couldn't live without, or something that you particularly is on every recording that you make?
I don't think I do. Like I'm not a gearhead really. Like it's that I buy it and and it's in the studio, and you kind of need a certain amount of this and that because people want to be able to at least know they're recording through some kind of name microphones and things that they're familiar with. They know their voice sounds good on this mic, whatever. It's a tough one, that. Like, apart from the obvious, like the tape machine, it'd be lovely to. It'd be sad not to ever record on tape again. That's one of the ones that kind of beats. Like I say, the expensive mics and the this and that and all this gear, the preamps. It's like if you just get it all going through, if you can get it all to go through that machine, then that's worth 10. Pre-API pre's or whatever. That's my view anyway. I'm not really a gearhead. I've just always used what is around, what I can get my hands on, I suppose.
Well, that's the old sort of thing of I think it's Jeff Emmerich is who I'm going to quote, and I think he's probably the person I've quoted most on this podcast. Right. But he's I'm sure it's him that said this. It was a quote about someone was asking him what mics the Beatles used in for a particular thing, and he just or why he'd used a particular mic on a particular amp or something, and he went, well, because it was the one that was the closest. And that's kind of what you've just said. It's the gear doesn't matter, and I love that answer. I think that's it's a brilliant answer.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of the times, a lot of the high-end gear works really well in certain situations, but a lot of recording is the job of like 57s, and little mics like that, really, that haven't, as far as I know, they haven't really been bettered. Just these, you kind of 60, 70 quid mic. It's a tough. Sometimes, maybe it's a testament to, my how rubbish I am at this kind of thing. But sometimes I've done. Mic'd up a guitar with a 57, and an 87, and there's a bit of joy. You get a kind of, kind of amalgamation of a sound which gives a kind of richer kind of saturation when you've got two mics on one amp.
Yeah.
But when I solo the two, and just listen to, right, that's just the 57, that's just the 87. It's like there's only a tiny bit of an EQ tweak on a plugin to make them sound so similar that Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how. It's a tough one.
I love it. I think you're absolutely right, and it boggles my mind that one of my favourite mics. I've talked about it on my sort of social media recently. Is this SE Electronics mic that I've got on my kick drum, and it was £60. I got it for
Right.
They're Sorry,
that was the brand I was trying to think earlier when I had the two condensers when I first started. They were SE Electronics.
Oh, were they? They are interesting.
Yeah.
Because they
So
make great
what
mics.
one have you got there then?
It's called an X1D.
Right.
And I think they made it specifically to be a low end, for basses or kick drums or whatever. And I think when they first came out, I think they were. Well, they weren't, as mics go, they weren't expensive, but they were a couple of £100 or £200 or £300. And then they just got discontinued for some reason. And I read an interview with a producer in Nashville who said that he was using this mic, and I think it was around the time that they came out, so he might have, he probably just bought it because it was new. And anyway, I found one on brand new on it, like it was because they're end of the line, and I think it was the last one in the UK because I looked everywhere for it.
Wow.
And it was £60, and it's incredible. I absolutely adore it, and I've got all the standard kick mics and used them before, and nothing sounds the same as this one thing that I've got, and it's just exactly what you've said, and it makes me smile that the preamp I've got it running through costs like 15 times that, and then it just doesn't matter. It's kind of like what you're saying.
It reminds me of when we were recording with the band. I remember we were using this producer we were a bit of a fan of because he'd done stuff with Teenage Fan Club and Clinic, those kind of bands at the time. Yeah. And we were obsessed with, I think, that album, Songs from Northern Britain, kind of quite a late Teenage Fan Club record.
Yeah.
I come out, and it's just got the most, powerful, big star kind of guitar, really middly, really punchy guitar sounds on it, all layered up and everything. And we're, like, how did you get that sound recording the guitars on that record? And it's like, so they had all their amps, in their flight cases on wheels.
Yeah.
And they just hung a 57 down, tangled around the handle so it didn't slip down, and then put the lid back on the case with the amp in blaring away. And that's how they did the. I'm just like, and I always kind of hear stories like that. You have to build up in your mind about, all this kind of, heritage and kudos and all this kind of these legends about, recording all this stuff, and some of it's true and it's amazing, but sometimes you're just blown away with like how unexciting or like how wrong it is that's how they did it, but it's got such a cool sound, by doing that.
Yeah.
Just boxing an amp back in its flight case with a 57 sideways on the cone. Do you know what I mean?
That's mad. I've never heard that. That's incredible. I'm written it down as you were talking about it because I want to go and listen to that record now.
Yeah. Great record, full of big pop hits,
nice.
Indie pop hits,
It's kind of making sounds that are different, isn't it? Rather than trying to recreate, a tried and tested method. You're trying to make something that makes people's ears prick up and go, "Oh, what's that?" And that's why it's so often wrong is good, because wrong is different.
And I've tracked a band with exactly the same setup, as the band the day before, and it sounds naff, it sounds horrible. It's a lot to do with how people play their instruments, and there's a lot more that will make something an exciting sound, and not generic, and not from the source, rather than chasing it with mics and preamps and EQs and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, chasing is a great word to use in this context. It's you spend your life chasing a sound that only exists because it was captured in a particular room on a particular day with a particular person, playing into it. Yeah, totally. Might have even been the air temperature that day. You don't know. There's so many variables in there of how all this equipment performs. Yeah. So I'd love to know if you have a. I was gonna. So I'm gonna ask for a sort of a piece of advice that you've been given, but I'm interested if there's a. I mean, you probably said it already, but there's sort of technical advice and then almost career advice. I mean, you've had a long career and moved studios numerous times, and you're still it's still working for you.
Yeah.
Do you have either one or the other or both bits of advice that you've been given that perhaps somebody who is listening to this who so maybe a piece of advice for somebody who's listening to this who's got a 2-track equivalent of the M Audio in a bedroom, how would they approach getting a sort of respectable sounding record? How would you advise that they approach that? Or some key points, really, rather than
I mean, I always feel like I've had some. I don't know. I guess what I feel has given me a bit of longevity is, like choosing. Like just not maybe sometimes not slowing the pace down in a session. Sometimes I know that if I stopped for 10 minutes and rejigged something or I don't know, just knew that I could get it to sound a bit better by doing something, but I'd have to kind of stop the session, take 5, da-di-da. If you can do that at such the wrong time that you'd never get the energy back that you've built up by, the relationship. This is quite an extreme situation. So, the relationship with the band and the excitement of coming in and everyone setting up and da-da-da. If you let something technical get in the way of that flow, you might not ever get that back in that session. So I would always take an inferior recording over something better where, it's sonically, technically better, but they're kind of going through the motions a little bit to get back to where they were.
Yeah.
I kind of feel that's helped me, have a bit of longevity, I think.
I think that's quite a difficult one for people to, say you're on your own in a room and you can have that same amount of energy that you're discussing. And there's the temptation there to just redo something because it's not quite right. Is stopping the momentum, as you're saying, and it could be, it takes a lot of again, it's a sort of bravery to say, well, that's an exciting take, even though it's not technically perfect. And sort of learning to go with the flow, even if you're just recording at home or recording with a few sort of friends together or whatever, doing something like you. I think that's a really good piece of advice.
I mean, it's a tough, how you asked the question earlier. There's just so many. Every engineer is different. The music they're like, the whole genre of how they record that type of music is so different. I guess it's quite niche. What the way I've done it. But not everyone's a kind of 60s head, kind of old type. More recently, I do. It's a matter of more to, I guess, regard to mixing, mastering, that kind of, trying to figure out, is that good, is that bad, can we do it better, and how do you land on the right decision? And I've learned to do a lot of kind of critical thinking. I do a lot of A-Bing these days, spend hours, deliberating whether, so that move that I just made there, is that better than what it was? And it's, this constant back and forth of trying to always add something of value to the recording. Sometimes that just takes loads of listening to figure it out. It takes a bit of time, that's that side of things. The temptation would be to like bang bang, like let's get another guitar solo down, I'll comp it up later, bang bang bang. Just like, if you've got the time, just take the time to try and get out of the bubble. Look, swim around a bit higher up and look down. Like, how important is this? What is that? Even though it's flawed, is that a more exciting take than this one that was perfect, but it just doesn't have something there. I mean, and in regard to running a studio, I've just basically just had to keep ahead of the game, really. Constantly moving, gentrification's been a big problem with keeping a space in a place, you know, where 3 years down the line you're there, suddenly it's like the trendiest place on earth, so you can't afford to be there anymore. And like, yeah, and as I say, it's not just me anymore at Soup. You know, it's been quite a while that I've had, you know, other guys alongside me helping, and they're just, I've got, you know, Giles and Dave and Sam, the three other engineers. They're just super talented in their own rights, and not just at engineering and recording. They've all got kind of like business skills as well, which really help keep something running. You know, I'm useless at that side of things, so you know, having people, you know, helping out, you know, in that side is just essential, really, or you go under.
It's so important.
Suddenly the studio would just be dead 1 month, and it's over. It's all over. Everything you've built up, you know. So
it's
teamwork. Yeah,
it's a skill that is doesn't come naturally to musicians, I suppose.
No.
But you know, I've had to drag myself kicking and screaming into it, and you know, it sounds like you're lucky to have some people who know about it as well, and it's just so difficult to market and stay ahead, exactly like you're saying. You know, within 6 months of making a decision that you think is going to be it's a really big decision we've made and it's going to change things. 6 months, a year later, you're having to do that again. And just keep moving forward because stuff changes so fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's a payoff, isn't it? Like, you could, if I'd decided to have done this out in the country somewhere, in a place that I owned or something, you know, great, you would have built this place, but, you know, I wouldn't have met all the exciting musicians if I hadn't have been in the centre of London, you know, working away all this time. And
I think that the fact that you've held on... Bustle. Sorry, I'm just going to say that the fact that you've held on in London is unbelievable. I mean, talk about Brick Lane. I mean, Brick Lane is, like you've just said, it was suddenly turned into the trendiest place ever, and however many others you went through, and just I do not envy you.
That move was probably one of the riskiest, because the studio I had before that was way up out of town, in Bounds Green, in a kind of, it was like a kind of series of office rooms that I'd kind of, you know, cabled up and everything, and I built a vocal booth, and it was really, you know, it was good. There wasn't one big room, but there was like 2 or 3, you know, main rooms and a good lounge with a piano, and you could smoke in there, and it was just like really a good recording space. It was private, you know, and you could, even though it was kind of, you know, quite disgusting, cockroach infested type of thing, you know, for a studio, it was quite. It functioned really well, you know. And then, you know, this band came in, and the drummer was halfway through building this rehearsal space underneath his ukulele shop for his band to record in, and he's just like, why didn't you come and set it up down there? And I'm like, oh, you know, the room, oh my god, it's like the size of 2 snooker tables, you know. And then the control room was like the size of 1 snooker table, you know, with a tiny little slot. You know, and it was just the most hideous idea to set up a recording studio down there. But if I'd stayed up in Bounds Green, I probably wouldn't have survived. I don't think, you know, it was moving down into the centre of town and doing something like that, like you say, every step you might have to give up some poshness or some technical stuff, you know, like a really good space sometimes, just for moving somewhere your recordings are flawed, but at least you're recording, at least bands are coming in because they know you're there under the ukulele shop. You know,
I love it. That sounds really cool. I'm sad I never got to see that. Love the fact that it's a ukulele shop as well. Very niche. Yeah.
Well, now it's some Ponzi clothes boutique.
Oh, is it?
Two rails and a dress for $2,000 or something.
Yeah, and then a breakfast cereal bar in the back.
Yeah, ironically, they had a drum kit in the centre of their main display in the centre of the ukulele shop upstairs. Was just like this naff like drum kit, black sonar drum kit or something. Just like, oh god, it winds me up too much, that kind of stuff. Oh,
well, it's almost like you've escaped it, but by staying in it, in the boat, it seems like the perfect solution.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's probably, I don't really have that much advice, really. I've kind of bumbled along, really. And a lot of luck, being at the right place at the right time, I guess, the right age and stuff. So, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
Is there...
now I crave for places like you got, like the top room of a brass band rehearsal place in a village up near in Yorkshire. That's like, oh God, I want that now. Just I'm envious of that kind of setup. So.
Well, the grass is always greener, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm going to link to. So you're on Instagram. Is it just at Soup Studios or?
Yeah, at Soup Studios. Yeah.
So I'll put some links to that in the show notes. And there's a really good website which I'd recommend people go and have a little poke around if they're interested to find out more. Is that soupstudios.co.uk? I'm trying to think off the top of my head now.
The website's soupstudio.
Yeah, studio without an S. It is .co.uk. Soupstudio.co.uk.
It is. Got you. Yeah.
Yeah, found it. So I'll put links to those, and I do recommend that if you're listening to this, that you do go and have a poke around. There's some great bands on there. I often get people asking me to recommend bands, and I found a few really good ones looking at the website. So I've got plenty to get listening through too.
Yeah, I mean, with all the 4 engineers, we've all got a kind of page on the website with all the kind of our own, stuff that we're really interested in. There's been some cracking, like, contemporary jazz, all that kind of the South London kind of new jazz scene. Lots of like really good hard rock stuff. Just it's an eclectic mix.
Yeah.
The 4 of us have quite different tastes and work in different ways, and it works. It does work. I really enjoy the work the other guys do as well.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at their pages, but I'll definitely go and have a look. Don't listen to much contemporary jazz nowadays, but I like to dip my toe in the water occasionally.
Yeah.
I mean, even just go and look at the website just to look at the big red boat. it's
a beauty. It really is. It's beautiful. Yeah.
It's been really lovely chatting to you. Thanks so much for speaking to me.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. I'll be using your services at some point. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to it.
That's how we got in touch. Yeah, there's always projects where it'll be easier to get Joe to record some, pertinent 60s drums rather than sweating away trying to get someone to do it, who's not quite, can't quite do it. So it's a great thing you've got going there.
Really good. I appreciate that. Thank you. So there we have it, Simon Trought of Soup Studios. I definitely recommend going to check out their website, Soup Studio, no S at the end of studio.co.uk. I'll put a link in the show notes. There's some cool pictures of the boat. There's one of it parked right outside the Millennium Dome, or the O2, whatever we call it these days. I'm from Leeds, I'm not from London. And there's some great microphones and some great shots of inside and all sorts of stuff. So it's worth just having a little nosy around that. And these also, if you go to each of the producers' sort of subsections, they have a lot of actual music from the artists that they've worked on. And as you've heard Simon saying in this sort of interview, he's worked with some pretty interesting artists and they all sound brilliant. They've all made their way. I have a playlist that I add to. Oddly enough, it's called Drum Practice Playlist. It's just sort of my playlist I have on in the house with the family. And a lot of the artists that Simon's worked with have made their way onto that playlist. It's a sort of a playlist of stuff that makes me feel happy. So there we go. Thanks, Simon, for coming on. Next episode, I have a interesting one for you. It's a new thing I'm going to be trialing. It's going to be almost like a subject podcast. So I'm chatting with 2 chaps who are experts on the drummer Bobby Graham, who had played on 15,000 odd hits in the 60s and sort of early 70s. And prolific applies to that absolutely. Sort of, you might describe them as he was part of the UK's Wrecking Crew, and he played on the Kinks, and they got in touch with me through the Shell Tell Me podcast. Because they've been in touch with Shell Tell Me about research for the Bobby Graham Facebook page. Anyway, they're super nice guys and super knowledgeable, and I want to start doing more of these episodes where a couple of guests and myself talk about the career of an individual, because unfortunately the nature of the topic that we're discussing, which is 60s recording, fewer and fewer people who were in the 60s actually doing the recording exist. And the ones who do exist have told their story a lot, so it's quite tricky to get hold of them often. And I think that it's not fair also to skip over people just because I can't speak to them directly. They often made a huge contribution to 60s recording. So there's a list of topics that I'd like to discuss, some of which have been suggested by you, and the first of which is Bobby Graham, which is obviously a topic that interests me because he was a drummer who, you'll hear me admit, embarrassingly, I'd never heard of, which is insane, but obviously I'd heard absolutely tons of the stuff he'd done. So that's what's happening next week, and I'd be really interested to hear your next episode, hear your feedback on that, because as I say, it's a new idea that I'm trialing. They're a little bit more work to put together from my point of view, but that's all good because I love putting them together. So there we go. That's what's to look forward to next time. That just leaves me to say, if you'd like to get in touch with me on a subject suggestion or anything like that, if you want to know about the remote drum recording that I do, or the Isolated Drums Club where I re-record the Beatles stuff, you can visit my website, allyouneedisdrums.com. You can get in touch with me, Joe at allyouneedisdrums, or send me a message on Facebook or Instagram and I'll reply on there. I tend to be a little slower replying on those than to email, but feel free to get in touch with me. I will always reply back to you. And I want to say a huge thank you to Mr. Joe Kane, who I should also mention, blooming heck, I feel like loads has happened in the last 2 weeks, has released a new project called The Poppermost. Like the toppermost of the poppermost, and it's incredible. It's like pastiche Beatles in the 60s. So I think I'm going to have to get him back on because it's absolutely unbelievable, and I want to know every detail about how he recorded that. So yes, I will certainly endeavour to do that, and go and check that out, the Poppermost. Anyway, yes, so thank you to Joe for putting the intro and outro music together, and my good friend David Henshaw for the artwork that he supplies for every podcast. And thank you for listening. I will see you in a couple of weeks' time. Goodbye!